If Congress wanted to pass a law dealing with greenhouse gases, of course they should, because they're Congress, because we elected them, and we can decide if what they're doing is good or bad, and then we can not elect them in the future, right? That's how the system works. That's how the people retain their sovereignty. But instead, again, right, the court decides, yes, greenhouse gases, these are within the remit of the EPA. And not only that, right, but under Obama, now we're going to start to get this sort of shift, not only from whether the EPA is going to regulate just, one particular power plant to basically reform some of its procedures, but instead the EPA is going to pull back the camera. And this is just wildly out of keeping with the spirit of the original law, right? It's going to pull back the camera and it's going to look at the whole industry, perform industry-wide changes that have to do with quote unquote next generation, right? Generational shifts, meaning basically that the coal industry full stop is toast, right? Let me read to you from the syllabus of this case, because now we're getting into the question that West Virginia brought, right? They said this is basically just destroying the coal industry because you've decided, right, that it cannot stand, right? And so having decided, this is from the syllabus of West Virginia versus EPA, right, that they could reduce carbon pollution mostly by moving production to cleaner sources. EPA then set about determining, quote, the degree of emission limitation achievable through the application of that system. The agency recognized that in translating the BSER into an operational emissions limit, it could choose whether to require anything from a little generation shifting to a great deal. It settled on what it regarded as a reasonable amount of shift, which it based on modeling how much more electricity both natural gas and renewable sources could supply without causing undue cost increases or reducing the overall power supply. This is in the EPA's estimation, right? The EPA gets to interpret the law. Now the EPA gets to decide what's reasonable, right? That it would be feasible to have coal provide 27% of national electricity generation by 2030, down from 38% in 2014. From these projected changes, EPA determined the applicable emissions performance rates, which were so strict that no existing coal plant would have been able to achieve them without engaging in one of three means of generation shifting. The government projected that the rule would impose billions in compliance costs, raise retail electricity prices, require the retirement of dozens of coal plants, and eliminate tens of thousands of jobs. This is why when I say, when people talk about this, the administrative state, I want you to think about the court, right? The grand, the court of King Louis XIV, right? Because one of the things that happens when you create these bodies is if the president is friendly to them, then he can wield them to his advantage. This is what Biden tried to do with OSHA, another such body, right, when he tried to mandate vaccines in the workplace. And so when the Supreme Court struck that down, right, that was another kind of tentative blow against this structure, saying, no, you can't just wield this. But presidents have been doing this basically forever, as we're shortly going to get into. As long as there have been these bodies, right, presidents that are friendly to the progressive agenda have been wielding these bodies to basically exert monarchic authority. But presidents like Donald Trump, right, who are not fans of the swamp, not fans of the deep state, have been thwarted at every turn. And so what it turns out is you have your own basically autonomous branch of government, which within its ever-expanding remit of control can be the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branch. It gets to decide what the law is, it gets to carry out the law, and it gets to interpret the law, right? And it's basically a little fiefdom over some area of American life, in this case, gradually, not just the environment, but business, right? So here is like a little parable in miniature of how these, minute mistakes, right, of Congress delegating its power to another agency explode outward, right, into basically a government unto itself that can be wielded by presidents who are in favor of progressive change, but that can't be wielded by presidents who try to oppose it. So it's a one-way ratchet, right? It only ever moves one way. It only ever entrenches its power, only ever digs its claws in deeper.